Thank you, Mr. Palazzo. At this time, the chair recognizes Mr. Case of Hawaii for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Attorney General Garland. First of all, I want to, as the representative from Hawaii with the highest percentage of Asia Pacific Americans in the entire country, I want to fully associate myself with my colleague Ms. Meng's remarks as to hate crimes, as well as to endorse your efforts to take a whole of government approach. That's critical for us to get to the bottom of this and do whatever we can in that regard. So I appreciate your effort on that front. Second, as to Mr. Palazzo's comments about China, the Department of Justice does have the China initiative underway, which I believe is appropriate under the circumstances. I don't think any of us should be under any illusions as to what China is up to here. However, there have been many concerns across our country, especially in our Chinese American community, as to really profiling of Chinese Americans in connection with reviews of China's interference and theft of our intellectual property, et cetera, particularly in our institutions of higher learning. So I would simply relay a caution to you that please be very attentive to those concerns and take them seriously. The intelligence community has done that. And within your own organization, I hope you will as well. Let me cover an issue which is not specific to Hawaii, but impacts us in particular, and that is that in our federal district court system, our District of Hawaii has been without a residential reentry center for almost 2 years now. We had a residential reentry center, or halfway house, if you want to refer to it as that, for 29 years until 2019, when the situation changed, and we have been struggling with DOJ and the Bureau of Prisons in particular to get one up and running again. And of course, you know from your own experience that the consequence of the absence of a residential reentry center not only prevents a reintegration of federal inmates into their community, but in the case of the District of Hawaii, and I think this is true beyond the District of Hawaii, the courts utilize that as an alternative to incarceration for two distinct populations, pretrial release and those on supervised release, or so-called public law placement. When you dig down to the bottom of this issue, it seems to be a question of unrealistic expectations being placed on the solicitation process and the bid process. We are in a unique situation here in Hawaii, and essentially the solicitations are ruling out any effective bids on this, and that's just not acceptable. We cannot send our prisoners and former inmates to the continental United States for these purposes. We shouldn't have to do that. The discussion has been the alternative of day release, which is not going to do the trick. And so I would simply ask for your own personal review and attention to this issue to see whether we can't punch through this and get that solution in place as soon as possible. May I respectfully request that?
Yes, of course. Residential reentry is critical to the First Step Act and the Second Chance Act approaches, which were passed by Congress. They are the way, both to reduce our prison population and also to prevent recidivism and to make it easier for people to reintegrate into the community and become good citizens within the community. So they are quite essential in that regard. I don't know the specifics with respect to the entry program in Hawaii, although I do understand that there's a new solicitation being worked on. And I will ask my members of the team to work this up and then talk to your staff about it directly.
Thank you very much, Attorney General. My remaining time, let me just follow up on Mr. Palazzo's comments on immigration, and I won't have time for you to respond, but I leave this with you. In reviewing immigration and especially a recent trip to the border, it became crystal clear to me that the burden on our immigration judges is in fact very, very acute, and is essentially incentivizing, as Mr. Palazzo said, the cartels to to manipulate weaknesses in our system to basically enhance human trafficking and their profits. And the critical weakness here is a lack of adjudication on a timely manner of immigration-related issues. And so my question to you, and we can take this up after the fact, is your request itself sufficient to handle what you view as a correctly as a huge problem? Is that going to do the job in terms of re-incentivizing that? And I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you with that hanging question and hopefully take it up with you in some other way. But it's a rhetorical question. Is that enough? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Case, and we'll allow the witness to answer. Take 30 seconds and tell us what you can in that space of time, Attorney General.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we have asked for a substantial increase for immigration judges, and equally important for the whole team that supports immigration judges. This will be extremely helpful for us at this point, and this is the amount that we need right now.
Thank you.
At this time, the chair recognizes Congressman Ben Klein. Thank you, Mr. Palazzo. Mr. Case, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Attorney General. First of all, I do want to express support for some of the specific programs that are reflected in the president's budget from a policy perspective. And the ones that I would note from your testimony are support for the Office of Violence Against Women, especially to reduce the rape kit backlogs, community-oriented policing, enforcing our environmental laws and environmental justice, and finally enforcing our antitrust laws where we see too much centralization of power going on out there, market power. So definitely support those initiatives. Can I please return with you to the subject of immigration? Because in my prior questioning, I asked you whether your request for an increase in the immigration judges was enough, given the backlog of 1.3 million, I think it is, cases. And you said, yes, it is enough for the time. And I just want to kind of get into that a little bit more with you, because it seems pretty obvious to me that the delay in adjudication, especially on the asylum side, is directly manipulated by those that are engaged in human trafficking. And so therefore the answer to that seems to be in two categories. One would be the speed of adjudication, which addresses some of the issues there. And the other is perhaps a broader policy question of our asylum laws to start with. And so I guess the first question I would have is, why do you think your request is enough? And what actually will that achieve? Will it achieve a reduction in the backlog of adjudications to 1 to 2 months? My understanding, at least, is that in some cases it's up to 2 years. I don't know that, but that's what I'm told, at least. And then finally, have you considered broader changes to our asylum laws, the procedure by which people can seek asylum, the standards for asylum? My understanding is that most of the asylum claims are denied when they're eventually adjudicated. So that would tell me that our asylum laws need to be updated. So two-part question, same problem.
Well, let me start with the human trafficking problem that you mentioned. This is part of our law enforcement concern and comes out of the law enforcement part of our budget. We do have a human trafficking task force, and we have some representatives in the Northern Triangle countries and in Mexico who are working on this problem. You're quite right that it is a significant problem that we have to defend against and provide law enforcement for. That the money for that is also already included within our criminal division budget. I can't tell you, exactly how much the reduction will be or to what number it will be with respect to the backlog. That's going to be the result of a combination of factors. So one being the increase in the number of immigration judges and their associated staff, and second being the technology improvements that we're hoping will improve that, and a third will be the mechanisms that the Executive Office of Immigration Review is looking at to put into place to make these run more efficiently. So very difficult to project what the reduction will be, but with this kind of many-pronged attack on the problem, I think it should be quite substantial.
But if I could just interject there for a second, you made a request. I mean, the request is for 100 additional immigration judges. You have a 1.3 million backlog. There must have been some basic assumptions that you and your department made in requesting that level of increase in immigration judges and that level of increase in funding that somebody felt was going to result in a sufficient amount of resources committed to the problem. So there must have been an assumption of the problem and of where this got us to in the solution. And I guess what I'm asking is, what are those assumptions? Are you assuming that there will be then a significant reduction, a very significant reduction in the backlog, which would I think at least result in some relieving of pressure on the exploitation of the weakness?
I agree with you that reducing the backlog will reduce the exploitation of the weakness. There's a total of a 21.5% increase here, which it's focused precisely on the backlog. We are also trying to hire up for positions that were not filled. So it's not just 100 additional. And there are limits to our ability to hire in any particular year. So we're trying to be good stewards of the money that you provide us. This is the amount of money that we believe we can effectuate. We can hire up for authorized level that are not yet hired, and then with the new hires and to make a significant impact.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there, and I appreciate the response.